Welcome. We are going to learn about the BMAD method, which promises to add some more clarity to your vibe coded projects, AI coded projects. And this has emerged as a kind of ground up idea of how to make these projects better, right? If you've used, you know, the term AI slop, if you used any AI, and if you use these AI code builders, you've noticed that you've made some mistakes or gotten into some error feedback loops and stuff like that. And naturally, what we're all trying to do is to reduce that and make sure that we make better projects. So the BMAD method has emerged, and I wanted to take a stab at it, I wanted to take a look at it and make sure that I understand what it is and try to explain it to you guys, because I've heard it explained in a lot of technical ways. I've seen some diagrams and stuff like that, and I just want to explain it in the simplest way possible so you can take it and plug it into your projects and hopefully get better builds. Okay, so let's go through it. I'll show you what it is on a theoretical level here with a couple of slides, and then I'll actually show you an example of me using it in Claude over here, and then I'll even give you a prompt. But I want to go through the theory first so we can understand what's going on. All right, so the major problem here is that when we're doing vibe coding and when we're talking to LLMs, generally speaking, right, they are having to do this big part of research and assumption in some ways. And the way I've heard it described that I really like for you guys to kind of take a think on is that essentially AI is autocorrect. I know it kind of simplifies everything, sometimes a little too much, but if you think about it that way, you really understand that what AI is doing a lot of times when you're having a conversation with it or when you're typing text into it, and I'm talking specifically the LLMs, is it's having these assumptions, it's having these autocorrect assumptions being made and then giving you what it thinks that you want, okay? That works when you're looking up like the weather or how to treat a bug bite or, you know, basic stuff like that. But when you're trying to create a software product or a vibe coded product, then that can get very complicated. And what the BMAD method is doing is trying to go from one pile of everybody's notes, all project notes, all different roles of a traditional software team, and to put it into something more organized. In this case, an example of a Kanban board, where at least you have different statuses and then individual tasks. And what it also does beyond that is break that down into individual personas or AI agents, as they calls it, so that you can have kind of a team of agents, a team of roles tackling the problem from different angles, right? You have technical people, design people, etc. Okay, so that's the fundamental thing, right? When we're talking to these LLMs like Claude, we're basically giving it a lot of information, and to build a technical product off of that, it's doing a lot of guessing to understand the screens, the buttons, the authorization, the implications of your words and stuff like that. And so going through this process will allow you and the AI coder to have a better understanding of what you're building specifically, okay? So on a 10,000 foot view, the two-step solution is going to be half handled in Claude and half handled in Cursor, right? And you can interchange that with, you know, ChatGPT instead of Claude or VS Code instead of Cursor. But one of them is essentially like a language-based thing, so it can produce documents for you that you will then take into your AI coding agent, which will be Cursor or whatever you use, right? Whatever platform you use, okay? And a lot of people want to say that planning takes 80% and building takes 20%. That can be true, but in some cases, you're building something for several years. So they're both kind of an ongoing thing, but fundamentally, you have two major phases. You do a lot of the planning to understand what you're actually building and making sure that it actually even has, you know, proper market value. And then also on the technical level, it's going to be plausible and you have like the tech stack to go with it. And then when you're building it, you're actually putting that stuff down, putting that stuff into practice, okay? I want you to think about phase one as the blueprints of a building, and then phase two as the actual structure of everything, right? And if you're building a building, you actually do need a lot of clarity if you think about it, right? You need clarity as to how many rooms, how many bathrooms, where the plumbing's gonna go, where the electricity is gonna go, because all those decisions are going to have real world implications. You're going to need to hire people, budget for things, and all that stuff. So, you know, you do want to pay attention to this, and then the real world hits the ground here, and sometimes you'll have to make edits on what you planned. But, you know, those are the two phases. Ideally, you do all the planning, and then you do all the building. Now, this is your AI planning team, as they put it, your AI agents. And as you can see, it's kind of like you would expect for a technical software team. You have business analysis, you have the product management, and you have the architect, which is like the technical stuff. You have UX, which is going to be the user experience or the user voice, if you will. And they all play a crucial role, and they all actually do have fundamental implications on what's going on in the building, in the code. Okay. So what you're going to do is essentially have conversations with each of these individuals. And in this case, it's going to be kind of in order. You actually move from one to the other. You have Mary to John to Winston to Sarah. You can rename these if you'd like, but this is what they've been named. And then you have the fundamental questions, right? The market research questions, the product requirement questions, the architecture questions, and then UX questions. Okay. And all that is going to help you to, on a personal level, understand your product more, make sure that you do have product market fit. So on one hand, it's kind of just going through the process of if it's worth it to build it or not. And then on the other hand, it's going to go through and say, okay, we've decided to build this. How are we going to build it? What specific features do you want? What specific features do you not want? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so you'll go through that process in conversation, and then you're going to end up in a second section, which is the building section. In that building section, you're going to have 3 different agents. One being the story master, which is going to break things down into user flows or activity bunches, kind of whatever you want to call them there. But basically, someone has to have an input as a user and have an output as a user, right? If I want to go and purchase something, there's all these little micro steps and screens that need to happen in order for that to be considered a successful transaction or user workflow. And the story master is going to have all those and then also lay out the plan for the individual kind of sprints of building in order to make those things possible, right? The developer is going to go and actually develop it. The QA tester is going to go and actually QA it. Pretty self-explanatory on those two. And this team is going to be a lot more of a cycle, right? The first one was a start to finish. You just begin the conversation, move from one person to the next person to the next. And this one, this AI team, the AI building team here is going to be more of a cycle, right? We're going to build something, develop something, and then test it. Or write something, build something, test it. Write something, build something, test it. Okay. And that can go on for, like I said, years, depending on the thing. Whether it's a micro SaaS, it could be a couple months or a couple weeks. If it's a major SaaS, it could be, as far as you want to take it. But that being said, that is the fundamental idea of BMAD. And here are some key principles of everything that you want to keep in mind. Obviously, complete planning before building, one story at a time. In all of AI, you usually want to be one thing at a time. Trust the process. You will probably run into still error loops and things like that. So again, I've been in hour-long error loops, day-long error loops, and then fundamentally, ultimately, it clicks. Okay. So trust the process, keep going through it, and make sure that you are just continuing to save everything so you don't lose it all, right? Commit to GitHub or save the files locally. Do what you need to do in order to make sure you don't lose any progress. Now what I want to do is walk you through an example of me going through the first phase of it. The second phase of it is pretty straightforward, but the first phase I think is where a lot of people will actually see the value in something like this. So we'll go through it now. There's 2 ways to get this started. You can go to the actual repository of the BMAD method here. It's public and you can see how there is a lot of agent definitions and actual markdown files and some more. You can download as much as you want and actually upload it into your basically Cursor or AI Copilot and then do things that way. Or you can do what I've chosen to do, which is to create kind of a summarized version. This here is going to do all the same thing. It's going to get all the planning agents and all the building agents. And the planning agents are going to be here walking you through everything in this chat. And then the building agents are going to be kind of informed by the documents that the planning agents do. And then that'll be all imported into Cursor or everything else later. So to show you a couple of examples of what you might see when you go through this process, as you get started, we're going to start with Mary, the business analyst. And the types of questions she's asking are going to be about the market opportunity and potentially any sort of roadblocks that you might run into about people accepting it, how the customers are going to use it, how the end user is going to use it, who are the end users, and different questions like that, as you can see here. Now, for the example, just so you know, I am recreating a client portal. This is for a transport business. And this business wants to have a portal for someone to go and check the status of their transport with all the individual milestones and all that. So all these questions are going to be related to that. But as you can see, you have more business focused questions as well as, the market opportunity. And as I was going through this, I was just answering questions as I saw fit. It was doing research as well. It actually returned a couple very accurate things that I was impressed by letting me know which softwares are my competitors, which things I would be utilizing and implementing, and even giving some suggestions based off of that. So very good conversation there on a business level. I really like that for like the ideation side of things, and it just helps you feel more confident in what you're building, and also might even save you some time by, maybe there's another solution that you integrate or something like that. Okay, so that's Mary. The next person is going to be this individual, the product manager, John. And John is basically going to take your thing and start to get into the, what's it actually going to be questions. What are we going to actually see? What are we going to be interacting with? How is it going to work as far as, what technologies? Is it going to be a mobile first thing, a web first thing? And what would make this thing be considered a success? And once you go through that, you should have a PRD document where it's going to be able to give you basically all the features, all the components of the build, and make sure that you have a clear understanding, and then obviously your AI coder has a clear understanding of those things as well. The next person is going to be taking all the information we've spoken about so far and start to create a technical plan. And the technical plan is going to basically talk about different tech stacks, and if you're using automation, which automation services you might use and things like that. And this is where I think you need to have a little bit more context and potentially, try the thing first, and then you can have more context into the decisions made by, in this case, Winston, the technical architect. And I say that because for a lot of things, this BMAD method and all these AI coders tend to treat them like full-blown software developed things. And sometimes a portal can simply be a single page portal, or a micro SaaS tool can be a simple form plus a backend. And I had to go have a couple different, back and forths with this, disagreeing with some choices that it made, because it started to get into the overcomplicated zone. And again, this comes with just knowledge of knowing when it makes sense to have certain technologies and certain things like databases, for instance, or authorization, for instance, and realizing that some things are just better off not tackling that stuff. So I have that, experience so that I can make sure that I cut it down here, because sometimes you can get into a place where you over-engineer something, and it could have just been done a lot more simply with a couple of webhooks rather than having a lot more internal bloat, I like to call it. Okay, so as you go through this, you'll do that. If you are comfortable with technology, have that conversation with Winston here, and you guys will come together on the technical things. And then last one in this stack is going to be the stories. This is where we're going to start to gather all the documents and then put it into Cursor. Okay, all the things that it has listed here with all the other tech stacks, technologies, the different conversation with the business analyst, with John, the PRD documents. Now we're at the point where it's all coming together. And with this last person here, the story master, the SM, they're going to go through basically the development phases. You can see here that we have the project foundation and the setup, the different objectives, the technical guidance, etc., etc. You can see here that we have more of the features being detailed out. So in this case, the order search page, and then the interactive route mapping. If you notice, there are some stories missing here. So typical AI, sometimes it just misses stuff. If you need to reprompt it to give you the ones that are missing, make sure you do that. But as you can see, it's going through all the different things and then having the objectives, the context, the criteria, some sample things, etc., etc. And then, so from this phase, this is basically the entire planning phase. And building phase is basically taking these documents, copying them and pasting them. You can do it into individual markdown files in Cursor. That's probably the best way. And then from that point forward, you can constantly reference those as what you're going to be building and making sure that you're doing that. And you can even edit them along the way. All right. So in the interest of being absolutely clear, I just wanted to show you guys this before finishing up the video. What you can do is basically go into Cursor in this case, and then in your SRC file is fine. You can create a folder and name it, let's say BMAD, and in there create a file and say story1.md. MD is basically like a Word file for code, and it just makes it a lot simpler. It's a markdown file. You should know what that is. But that being said, once you do, you go back into Claude, into the documents that you did, and then go one at a time, and then copy this in, and then what you can do is reference it. So in the chat over here, if you do @story1, you'll see you can have that markdown file, and then this is going to provide the context that you need for the individual development cycles. So you can do that with each of the story documents and briefs that you get, as well as the agents. And just remember, you're not obliged to use every single one. And if you want to make edits, feel free to do so. If one of the agents is giving you trouble or one of the stories is giving you trouble, feel free to kind of copy and paste and move things around. But this is a nice starting structure for you to go off of. And then if you want to just create it into your own method, feel free to do so. Again, it was simply a method that I saw out there in the internet in the zeitgeist of AI coding, and I wanted to make comments on it. So hopefully that simplifies it and makes it a lot easier for you to get into something like this. I think it is useful if you have not built anything. I've built a lot of different prototypes, a lot of MVPs, a lot of things for myself, a lot of things for clients. So naturally, I've understood the questions I need to ask myself and then I need to consider in order to build a project properly, right? And I think this method is great if you don't even know what questions are good questions, right? That's kind of the thing about breaking into a new field. If you're just getting started with this or sharpening up your skills, you want to understand the lexicon of the space and you want to understand the questions to ask. Okay, you can measure a lot by an individual and their professionalism by the questions that they ask, and this thing is going to help you have that context and be able to do things in a more clarified way. So I think it's definitely worth it for you to try at least once to go through the process of at least just the planning. And then if you decide to do it with the building, go ahead and do that. And you can even make documents and all that stuff. Remember, you're still the master of your builds. So that being said, I highly recommend you give this a shot. And if you'd like to do it, go ahead and get the prompt that I'm going to link below, the one that I used for my actual conversation here in Claude. And then you can also check out my school community where I talk about more things like this, building, planning, and even making money off of these types of builds. So that being said, talk to you guys next time.